Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out of your day to talk about experiential marketing and what does it mean now. I wanted to just take a minute to introduce you to the idea of Talk Nerdy to Me. If you haven't been to one of our webinars or one of our previous in-person talks, this is actually something that Thinkingbox has done for a number of years now, as we're known for kind of doing experiential work, interactive work, hardware development, content development, social media. And we started doing a series of talks a number of years ago to help our clients and partners and to essentially kind of explain different types of technologies, to give a little bit of a grounding in things like AR, VR, machine learning, and of course today, some of our work in experiential during the current COVID times. So today, thanks for joining us. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce the colleagues that will be talking through some really interesting stuff with me today. Of course, I'm Christine Clark. I'm the Managing Director in Toronto. We have Rania, Hattar, who is our Managing Director in Los Angeles and has done hundreds of wonderful experiential campaigns. We have Hugh, Elliott, who is our Senior Creative Technologist and Hardware Expert. And last but not least, Daggitt, who is our Interactive Developer, does all kinds of amazing work with projection, as well as a lot of really cool kind of programmatic visuals. So a really great panel today to kind of discuss different types of tools and technologies, and of course, theories around experiential and a little bit about what we think experiential is today. So without further ado, our talk will start now. And we're really going to take you through kind of a new perspective on experiential marketing, which I've seen a million times. If you can jump to the agenda, I'll just go through kind of what you can expect to hear today. And then, of course, we'd love to have a discussion afterwards in the Q&A. First, of course, is an introduction, which is what we're in right now. We'll talk a little bit about kind of from 30,000 feet, what is experiential marketing at all? And then we'll dive into some of the challenges that have been posed by obviously everything that's going on in the world right now, given the circumstance of the COVID-19 pandemic. We'll talk a little bit about theories and level setting around how we're thinking about positioning executions right now and why it's important, and why we think actually brands have a really big opportunity to do something now rather than even before. We'll talk about what we're calling the fun stuff, which is essentially a menu of a bunch of different kinds of things that are getting us really excited, from large to small, and how to use them and kind of how to integrate them. Some experiments that we've done, some prototypes that we've built that are kind of proof of concepts. Then we'll talk through a couple of end-to-end examples as we kind of talk about a lot of individual things. We'll string them together a little bit to create a discussion. And then last but not least, some Q&A. So let's go, shall we?
Thanks, Christine. So what is the true meaning of experiential? Now, we've all touched upon it in our life in one way or the other. Now, something experiential comes from the real world, from experience. Some knowledge comes from reading about it, but experiential knowledge comes from actually experiencing it. Example, if you learn to sail by spending every summer on the water with your own boat, then you have an experiential understanding of sailing. If something is experiential, it's real rather than conceptual. So with that said, in this new world of not touching things, how do we keep experiential and integrated marketing alive? How do we engage the audience past the usual comfortable cocoon of experiential that we're all used to? People are still going on with their lives, albeit differently, but does that mean things have to stop? No, it doesn't. It's more of how do we pivot? How do we now satisfy this new need? This is where we come in as Thinkingbox. We've been working on experiential now for 5 years. Yes, it's been around the art scene for about 9, and 5 in the advertising and marketing world. And with all this knowledge that we have, we wanted to help you navigate this odd time. So Christine, tell us about the different types of experiential campaigns that everyone's used to seeing.
Right, yeah. So just to kind of level set, because this kind of work can span literally anywhere and everywhere, there's a lot of kind of things that we're used to, which are of course changing nowadays. And that's anything from a pop-up that you might see at a train station or in a mall, or potentially in a space on a busy street, which can be branded, which can be retail, which can be, you know, to promote a film, can be for anything. We do a lot of stunts. These are typically things that are kind of surprise and delight, or, you know, real world people kind of going through an experience that they don't quite know they're a part of until they do, and it creates wonderful content for both web and TVC. Events of all kinds, all shapes and sizes, from a massive concert to, you know, a closed influencer dinner of 50 people to promote a specific product. These are some really common pieces. Go next. We also have trade shows. These are obviously super common. And, you know, one of the things that I think are a biggest challenge right now, because, you know, trade shows are a really great place for brands and marketers to connect directly with an audience that you already know is engaged with you in a physical place, get people to touch and feel things. Retail, which again spans a ton of different places, but the types of things you see in malls, end caps, grocery stores, things like that. And then last but not least, these all can have a layer of interactivity, which is what we specialize in. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And these can be done either just as sampling events without any interactivity, or potentially something that has a lot of software involved with it to create something even more special. On top of, so with all of these kind of things, of course, they're all super physical. They all involve crowds. We're thinking a lot about what are these challenges that we're coming across, and how are we able to kind of level set, the idea that we can create, that we want to create these experiences, that we want to have this kind of quality over quantity, which is why, you know, this type of marketing is even a thing. When we can't gather together in a crowd, when nobody wants to be talking to a BA at close range, or brand ambassador at close range, when people aren't interested in having a shared experience with strangers, and when nobody wants to touch anything and people are extremely worried about sanitization. So we're going to kind of start with some of these things and how we can quickly and easily address them, but on top of that, think about how we can go around it. So go ahead, Rania.
So COVID-19, love it or hate it, we are where we are. We've now become used to seeing the ways a lot of retailers and restaurants are acclimating so we can feel safe. So our goal is no different. It's to make sure everyone feels comfortable, safe, clean, and is having an overall wonderful experience. There are many ways to go about this, but the obvious ways are what we're used to seeing: the floor decals, the digital temperature checks. Now, with that said, let's not just put them in for the sake of putting them. Let's have the wait time, for example, at the temperature check station be where you sign up, and the floor decal be an actual part of the storytelling and the user journey. The other way is we can inject branded sanitation stations that have water, soap, paper, napkins, as well as disinfectant, but also we can have sanitation stations that have screens on top of them or within them that have relevant content playing above the dispenser to interact with the user. There's a lot of creative ways that we can inject this new norm into the user's journey for it to feel natural versus forced. Now, another layer is the extra behind the scenes safety measures that we take. We use COVID supervisors, daily on-site crew testing, crew and crowd control, by making a lot of the event parts autonomous, as well as disinfecting misters. Now, these misters are skin, clothing safe, and they don't need airing out. It's actually quite instant, and TV studios have been using them recently to be able to get back to recording their televised game shows and singing competitions. Now, everything I just mentioned is not rocket science, but giving all the above points a little bit of thought helps us stand out by making the user journey fun versus another queue you need to be in as we navigate through our day-to-day life. So knowing that, Christine, how do we creatively move forward?
Yeah, thanks, Rania. So as Rania was just mentioning, all of these things are things that we'll consider no matter what we're doing. But outside of that, we don't want to be kind of bogged down with sanitization and things like that. We want people to feel safe as a first step, but we really want to start thinking about how can we engage with people in this new normal, which is a phrase I hate, but we'll carry on with it. So next slide, please. We've come up with 3 big pillars that we've really kind of based a lot of our thinking around, and how we're going to address this, and how we're going to continue to grow, and how we're going to continue to engage with people in a specific way. So the first is essentially to be loud, to make something noticeable. Currently, right now, we have an opportunity that is, both a challenge and an opportunity, but we're able to say, there are not many people doing anything right now. So you can stand out more than usual. And this is a huge thing. And one of the things that we really have done, and that's always really been a part of this, is making the world your stage. Using set decoration, using big, bold visuals, whether that be screens, whether that be printed, whether that be decals, whether that be projection. The mediums are interesting, but the content is what matters. And being able to surprise someone in a space where they're going anyway. Maybe you're not going to catch people going to as many kind of leisure outings, but you can find your target, or you can find the type of person you're trying to connect with in their daily walk, in their grocery store, in their curbside pickup. And so we really want to think about the spaces that people are going to be in, and what we're trying to communicate, and how that's going to come across. And so, the first thing is to be splashy and to put something out there that's going to stop someone and give them a feeling that they're somewhere else. In this world right now, it's so dreary. We're going into winter. There's a lot of kind of mixed feelings about what's going on in the world. If we can make someone's day, in their regular day, just that little bit extra special by creating an experience in their day-to-day life, that's actually going to stick a little bit longer. So kind of building on this, next slide. We can add to that. We can do something completely passive, like, really just create something that is, really a new kind of way to think about just a typical OOH ad, but it doesn't necessarily need to be a billboard. It can be a building, it can be graffiti, it can be a screen, it can be anything. But we can also layer in what we're calling passive interactivity. Which is the ability to surprise and delight people in these spaces where they are. And Patrick and Hugh are going to get into a lot of the kind of individual technologies that are really interesting here. But we can bring an experience to life by recognizing someone's existence and then serving them unique content. We can recognize something on their face and serve them unique content. The visual here on this slide is actually for Portia, and it was a piece we did a few years ago where when you're driving through the parkade in a mall, you were able to kind of look over at this large wall of LED screens, and instead of seeing your own car, you'd see a magic mirror that would show you as a Porsche Macan. And that, it's just something that surprise and delight. Nobody had to do anything. Nobody had to talk to anyone to participate. There are absolutely ways to do these kinds of things, to create opportunities in spaces where you don't need a crowd, you don't need a brand ambassador. And this kind of links back to the curbside pickup note we'd made before. We think that this is a really great way to think about how can we engage with people in a place where they need to sit and be anyway. Make it something special for them. Next. And then getting even more personal and getting even more interactive. For lack of a better way to put it, we can call it active interactivity. Even though nobody wants to touch an iPad at a place anymore, or nobody really wants to engage too much with a brand ambassador, there's still ways to create a much more personalized engagement, or a much more active engagement. And this is with a smartphone. Everyone has them in their pocket. Our smartphones are able to connect to literally anything. And to do literally anything, you can create a conversation, you can control something physical, which he will get into in a little bit. You can share, You can also collect data. You can do all kinds of things with a smartphone that would sometimes be something that we would build bespoke, but everyone has this tool in their pocket, and the possibilities of what we can do with an experiential lens with this is really endless. And it's the way to create kind of that conversation in a way that we can't with other tech. So we'll get into that. And now the fun stuff. I'll pass this off to my colleagues, Patrick and Hugh, to talk about some of these individual technologies, why we're excited, and then we'll tie it all together.
Thanks, Christine. So, as Christine had mentioned before, it's really important that, during COVID, that people will be able to keep their distance and feel safe. So the first and foremost, we want to make sure that everyone gets a great experience, no matter where they have entered it. That being said, I think that the display technology that you choose for your experience is of paramount importance, because we just want to make a splash. So we're going to go over a few here and talk about why you would use each one. So the first one is projection. And projection is great because it scales up infinitely. It can be shaped to the shape of a building or a car. It's really super flexible. The only downside is that obviously it has to work in a fairly dark environment. So nighttime or darker indoor spaces are perfect. But if you're dealing with any type of light pollution, the next solution is probably a little bit better. So a lot of people will choose to use LEDs as the display technology for their experience because it works so well during the day and in brighter areas where there's a lot more light pollution. It's very vibrant, but generally you're kind of bound to the rectangular shape of the tiles that make up these displays. But it's definitely my preferred display method. And it's so bright that you'll be able to see it from quite a ways away. So you can, disperse your crowds and make sure that people aren't getting too close to each other. Last but not least are just screens, right? Screens are ubiquitous. They can be hung almost anywhere. And the nice thing about them is that we can take a piece of content that would have been on one of these larger display technologies and create several kiosks where someone can have a personal experience a little bit closer, but not have, to be around so many people in such tight quarters. Now, that being said, we're an interactive company and we want to create experiences that allow people to take an active role. That is usually done through data that comes in via sensors. Now, touchscreens and knobs and things that we would use before just won't work with COVID-19. So right now, we're just going to take some time and highlight a few sensors that could be implemented into an experience that don't require any physical touching of an object. So the first one I wanted to point out was that there is a new generation of Kinect. For anyone not familiar with what Kinect is, it's a depth sensor. So it works a lot like a camera, but it uses, instead of visible light, it uses infrared light to grab the positions of people in front of it. And the new Kinect Azure has a few new features that really make it stand out. Most notable is that we can use multiple Kinects now. So we can chain these guys together and create a depth sensing space that's much larger than anything that has been made with Kinects before. The other thing is that the Kinect Azure is actually connected to machine learning algorithms through some cloud computing. And we're able to take the data that comes in from the Kinect and do lots of fun stuff with it. Image segmentation, for example. You could look for specifically like bananas and then cut out the bananas in each one of the pictures that you're using and then use them in some sort of a collaborative composition. Or also there's, some advanced posing stuff. So we can pull poses from people, where something like what you're seeing here was done with an original Kinect, and there's a few software layers on top of it to get the poses. The Kinect Azure does this natively and quite quickly. We can pull emotions and all sorts of stuff with this new generation of Kinect. The next sensor is a lot like a Kinect, but it just works with a different scale. So the Leap Motion is also a depth sensor, and it's been designed to get highly accurate positions of all your fingers or any type of object that's been put in front of it. Imagine signing your name with a chopstick, and it will very accurately get the position of the tip of the chopstick. Or you know, maybe it's a traditional touch screen, but instead of touching it, we're sensing the space right in front of it, and people are able to just kind of, you know, Minority Report style interact with the screen. The last one is really cool. This is from the same people who make the Leap Motion, but instead of it being a sensor technology, it's actually for you to be doing the sensing. So it can modulate air particles to allow you to feel virtual objects. So you might maybe make an activation where it's a game and people have to feel this virtual object and try and decide what exactly it is, and win a prize if you get it right. LiDAR is, it's the new hot thing. It's being included in a lot of the new iPhone Pro models and iPad Pro models. This movie you see in the bottom right-hand corner was made in 4 minutes with someone's iPad, and it's a full 3D scan of their office space. LiDAR works a lot like the traditional Kinect, but instead of using infrared light, it uses lasers. So it sends out a field of lasers and then waits for the lasers to bounce off something and come back. Using that time of flight measurement, they can get a really good sense of where objects are in physical space. And you're seeing it kind of like take over from the infrared sensors because of its versatility. It can have, you know, a range up to 150 meters. It works great outside where something like the Kinect won't, because the sun is also an infrared light. And they're just kind of showing up in different technologies all over the place. I'm reaching down right now because I've got this guy. Oh, is it going to do it? This is our fancy new dedicated hardware for the LiDAR. But you'll see a lot of people getting them in their iPhones pretty soon. The last part is where I'm going to hand this over to Hugh because it's his specialty. But I just wanted to say that there is a nostalgia for the physicality of these types of experiences that was kind of lost during the COVID time. So anytime we can integrate something that is physical in any nature, but in a safe way, I think it's a plus, because it really gets people excited and gives them a sense of what life was like before we had to deal with all of this.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, you know, I actually spent a lot of time tinkering. I just gathered a bunch of stuff because we're going to talk about Arduino, and I was like, you know, I can actually just show you Arduinos. I can show you boards and, you know, lights. So, you know, when you have an abundance of imagination and a relatively filled studio full of junk, a lot of things become what you really want to do. So Arduino, so I'll just say it, Arduino are input output, they're microcontrollers. So they take inputs and they provide outputs. So you can have the sensor, the Kinect sensor, a distance sensor, proximity sensor, whatever, and it takes that value and whatever you do with it, whether that's using light to figure out what you want to do with that, or whether you want to spin a motor, the microcontroller doesn't really think too hard about it, and that's its main job, is to be kind of a dumb machine. All the calculations that are important would be done on a computer or on a Raspberry Pi or something similar, but you would want to keep it limited to, you know, sort of the simplest thing. Like, this is a prototype I built really early at Thinkingbox when I started to talk about transducers, which I'm going to talk about later. But you can see here, or here, right? This is a small microcontroller with an amp and a transducer and a battery pack. And it's this super fun little toy that I could bring in and go, well, this is how they work. Because a lot of what I deal with is stuff that doesn't exist. And I have to prototype something rather quickly to convince people that, no, we could make it happen. It could go. Luckily, you know, Thinkingbox has a lot of vision, so I don't have to spend that much time convincing people. Everybody's got a lot of imagination and heart. So yeah, and I wanted to point out also, you may not see me or you do, but this is a RGB LED panel, just like what we showed with the LED things. So these are what you would use to display those big displays. And I know Patrick really likes flip dots, so I want to let him talk about flip dots.
Sure, thanks. And I just wanted to kind of give an example for the Arduino stuff too. You could imagine maybe a physical space that's being monitored by webcams, And we have some sort of a web client that allows people to control the physical objects over the web. And maybe they work together to get a ball through a Rube Goldberg machine together and win a prize or something like that. Flip dots is a super cool thing, but it's quite old. It's experiencing a bit of a resurgence just because of that physicality. You can really, it's a display technology, a lot like a television or LEDs or projection, except it's just these physical dots that flip over, and they have quite a fast frame rate. And these new digital controllers for the flip dots are allowing us to display, 30 frames per second video. We can pipe in any type of graphics, data from the web, etc. But when you have a large panel of these, it's a great way to attract some attention, just because you can hear them and see them flipping. It really has a great visceral effect. The last note on this slide here are performative spaces. So yes, maybe we won't be able to have a ton of people within these spaces, but if we create these spaces and invite people in one-on-one, just giving them an area to experiment with and explore some sort of generative music or drawing within the physical space using their bodies can be really impactful.
Sorry. That's me. I apologize. I was on mute. As we talked about earlier, as Christine mentioned, one of the things that we really want to mine is the ubiquity of the smartphone. Everybody that we try to reach would have one in their hands. And luckily, with its global reach, we don't have to worry about an experience that is only located in one spot. We are geographically free. And I think one of the interesting things, and one of the things that I have been really thinking about over the course of the past, it's 1,000 years, right? Since we all went into lockdown. So over the course of the past 8 months or 6 months or whatever, has been how do we allow people to experience what we experience physically, but virtually? So if we want to just hop over to the next slide. So here we talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about the things that I've been working on to figure out proof of concepts and prototyping for what we can do in a digital and physical world, which Christine had coined the term phygital, which always makes me kind of itchy, but it is a thing that we have been working on. So let's go to the next slide here. So Window DJ was a proof of concept, or is a proof of concept for a couple of things. One is an entry system. We had talked a lot with clients about how do we get people safely into a location that has really safe distancing and allows us to know that they're there physically, as opposed to a lot of web experiences. We can't tell if you're physically there. So what we created, what the plan is, to have something that I've been calling Gatekeeper. And Gatekeeper is a simple 4-digit display, which you can see in the animation, that the video, that allows us to know someone is physically present. And that gives us, with a simple web interface, we can create the Gatekeeper, which keeps us aware of their presence and lets them into the experience. And in this case, the experience is that they can play music. If you go to 33 Britain Street in Toronto, that is the Thinkingbox Toronto office, and we have this set up in our window where you can go to windowdj.thinkingbox.com, enter in the 4-digit. It's a randomized code, so don't bother putting in 9874. It's not going to work for you. And you can actually play from the playlist, the Window DJ playlist that is on Spotify, which you can find as well, which are songs picked by the Toronto staff. And this plays through a transducer, which is that thing that I showed you on my prototype. It plays on a big transducer through the window, and you can have a little dance party outside of the Toronto office. Whether or not you want to do that, that's totally up to you. But hey, free world. Next. Next up is a personal goal of mine to bring long exposure photography to the world. I've been doing a long exposure project for the longest time, and honestly, I love how it feels. It's very poetic to me. The art of it is just fantastic. And what I wanted to create was something that we've dubbed Drawbot. And Drawbot is a 2-axis system with an LED that you create your own art. You would live stream it. You would be able to control it using your smartphone. We'd again have a queuing system. And the point of it is that at the end of it, you would end up with your own artwork that you would have created. And what we want to do, and part of the proof of concept of Drawbot is a queuing system, live stream queuing system, and motor control. So if you were to look quickly at my video, this is the brains of Drawbot. It's a simple Arduino with some driver motors, or motor drivers, excuse me, and some power control and an LED controller. But that's the beauty of Arduino. Arduino allows us to create these kind of serial instances that we can communicate from a computer to a website to a simple machine. And you know, I got to give a shout out to Patrick, who created the Python script that Window DJ is controlled with to the communication between the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi. I think that might be it for Drawbot and Window DJ.
Thanks. So to tie kind of everything together and just kind of touch on what he was mentioning, there's so much we can do with all of these different technologies. And of course, we've talked about a lot of different kind of like ingredients, and certainly not all of them. There are way too many to cover in a like 40-minute webinar, but we wanted to pick out some of the ones that we thought were really relevant for, you know, for life with COVID-19 nowadays, and for ways to create kind of automated communication systems, things like that. One of the things I really love about Drawbot, which I don't think Hugh touched on, and apologize if he did, is that it's something you can log into from somewhere else. You can draw something in real time with a robot in Light, How, and then it's something that can create a shareable giveaway too. And this is just one example of a million different things we can do. We've been kind of joking that you can kind of pick a couple of different ingredients, if you will, and create something out of almost anything. Of course, we want to circle back to the why and circle back to what the goals are, and make sure that, of course, it's aligned with, say, a brand or a film or whatever that is. So we just wanted to take a minute here to give a couple of super high-level examples of how you might adapt what you might have done in an experiential land 2 years ago to something you might do now. In a couple of different verticals. So for instance, in entertainment, if you're promoting a film, what you might do a couple of years ago is, you know, do a big stunt to create a buzz, get some kind of viral video content going. And of course, you know, these are a little more challenging now given the crowd. So instead what we might do is try to surprise someone with some of that, what we might have called passive interactivity, where while you're walking by an interactive billboard, it actually recognizes you and puts you inside the scene and then lets you film it and share it. In a retail environment where you might have had, say, a person or somebody kind of walking you through the shopping situation, now maybe you're at a curbside pickup and you're able to scan something with your phone and take the shopping experience back home with you, and open up a virtual store using that LiDAR technology in your own home. And another example being, say, like in grocery, where you might have done a sampling event where you have a brand ambassador handing out food samples, having people kind of stand over a table and talk. It's not quite as doable nowadays, but you can totally do something that's really personalized and interesting with, say, a series of lockers that automatically unlock, and you connect in with your phone, you play a little game or enter a little quiz, and you get a personalized item given to you as a part of that sample without any communication with a human, although it can feel quite human, that is personalized. And of course, these are super high level examples, and every execution is going to be completely different, but it's a little bit of a taste of how we might put some of those things together to create something really fun. And on that note, it's a perfect segue to our question and answer. We'd love to have really good discussion with you guys on any questions you have about technology, about what we've been doing, or, you know, literally anything. So post it in the chat, and Farah will help coordinate the responses.
So we have a question. It's, how can AR play a role in experiential activations?
I can take this one, and guys jump in. I love AR and experiential. There's so much opportunity to do it, but one of the most kind of obvious but also awesome ways is using what's called target tracking. And so, for instance, we might have like a big poster or an OOH ad, or, you know, it really depends on the brand, but let's pretend it's something with like kind of a visually unique style. And you might ask the user to hold up their phone to look at this, you know, physical print, and then that print would come to life on the phone. And then be able to kind of push people through different channels, have them shop, have them do things like that. You can also create a physical experience for someone that doesn't actually exist in front of them. But I would say one of the basic ways would be to use that target tracking and to actually bring physical things to life in front of you.
Just to add to that, the AR tools that are being built into iOS 14, you know, allow us to have those types of models and experiences just pinned to a specific geolocation as well. So we can use markers, we could use locations. There's a lot that can be done, and even more when we see more LiDAR devices incorporated into our cell phones.
Awesome. We have another question. We have a couple more questions. What can we do with activations that revolve around an edible product?
I can actually do that. So it goes back to what Christine and myself keep saying. The most important thing about experiential is making it about the person that's there. So it's not going to be any different than what we're doing. And most important is you need to make it feel natural. If there's, especially with, like, as we said, no one wants to eat anything, no one wants to like take their mask off. But if you make the user journey flow feel natural, where it's part of it, that where you're corralled to an area that you can sample the set product, it can be set up with using the technology that Hugh talked about with the coding, and it unlocks a small lockbox that has a clean, sanitized, for example, a yogurt cup that you can open with plastic, be clean, and then everything is cleaned and sanitized. And for me, for example, I hate it when I go to a restaurant and all they do is just put this plexi and you feel like you're in a bloody fishbowl. Like, there are ways to do this with design creatively that really looks like part of the event itself. So really look at it as a whole and as a user journey versus as a problem, and how do we tackle it?
Thanks, Rania. Another question was actually, this was asked twice. What has been your favorite activation to date? So maybe we can just go around and you can each name an activation, just a quick sentence about it.
This is such a hard question.
Right? It's like asking who's your favorite kid, and you're like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not that one.
I've got one. I definitely think that Shawn Mendes was my favorite. It was a huge experience. Guests would check in, and then they would get personalized text messages from Shawn himself. And then they got to kind of have a day in the life of Shawn Mendes. So there was a recording session, and they'd be put on stage. And then along the way, little moments of them were captured. And as they exited, they received each one of these little takeaways in an email. And Shawn actually came and surprised a few people as well. It's quite cool.
I thought you were going to say you had a favorite child, but anyway. My favorite one recently, the reason I love it is because it happened in TED Talks. We did it for DuPont with RJ in New York. And the challenge was behind the scenes. So it wasn't seen or felt by the people. It was more as, how do we actually build a story and humanize a product that is basically used in buildings or plastic or chemicals, bring it to the consumer and make them understand how literally it's in your everyday use, and how especially about how they've been trying to make it more environmentally safe.
Hugh?
Sure. I started at Thinkingbox in early January, and then by March we were locked down. So I didn't get a lot of opportunities to do activations. I did get to build a giant LED wall for an event, just like it felt like it was a week before we all went into lockdown, and I got the real pleasure of designing the wall, like sending stuff over to the fabricators and integrating the whole thing, and working with Patrick a lot for the display. It was my first sort of big project, and I really enjoyed doing it. And it was really just a big LED wall, but it was something that I built from scratch, and that was definitely the most satisfying.
You're totally underselling it. I've seen it in person. It was, I'll just like give you a little props there. It was actually, as Hugh mentioned, a completely built from scratch LED wall. But the cool thing about it was that he actually prototyped materials to hang over the LEDs that would give it this really interesting kind of artistic effect. And you can probably find it on our Instagram back in March. It was like, yeah, as you said, I think it was like March 10th. But it's like this really super cool thing that we want to kind of keep developing, because it's not just like a normal LED wall you can go buy. It's like a really artistic and interesting piece. And it's
this is one of the earliest prototypes, is in the background using black LED acrylic. And it was one of the first things that I built just to show as a proof of concept.
Yeah, he's like, can we build this? I'm like, yes, please. I have such a hard time picking a favorite activation, but I'll have to say, and there was a couple of slides on it, if you saw some cars with projection on it. Nice. This one was when we did in Toronto at the Toronto Pearson Airport. It's actually still live now. You can see it, and it is COVID friendly. It's a moving walkway experience that we developed with InOcean. That essentially you hop on the moving walkway after you get out of the valet parking. There's a number of screens running beside you on the right, and this car, this Genesis vehicle, G70, forms beside you and beautifully drives next to you. And when you get halfway down the moving walkway, we actually built a tunnel over the moving walkway. And on the right side, there's glass, and there's actually a real vehicle and a curved projection screen. And this is on our case study list, so it's a lot easier to kind of just see a visual if you look on our website. Sorry, but there's an actual vehicle where the content seamlessly connects from the screens that you're following through to the actual vehicle that looks like it's having all of these particles blown off of it, and then it becomes photoreal and drives into a parking lot. And that was a big labor of love that took over a year to build, and just given the longevity and the work, it's my favorite.
Thanks, Christine. So the next question is, what is the timeline for your capabilities moving forward into 2021? FX has a number of shows returning in or around March of 2021.
FX.
Christine, you can go ahead. I can go ahead. It's basically, hi, Christina. So, all our team is in-house, and we have an amazing HR and resourcing team. So, I'm sorry, that's my partner. He decided to blow leaves right in front of my window, working from home. But as you know, because of our great resourcing in HR, we're always open and available, and we always work very honestly. If it's something that is in our wheelhouse, we'll definitely go about it. And if it's not, we'll actually point you in the right direction of who is the perfect partner.
Thanks, Rania. All right, next question. How can we foster a sense of community with distancing?
I've read that, and I had a couple of thoughts. I think that obviously it's a challenge right now, but if you create an experience that is inherently collaborative, where it maybe has an asynchronous interactivity where people can put in, their little contribution whenever they have time, but it creates something larger as a whole, that definitely would build a sense of community. Thinking of maybe this project called On the Moon by Ai Weiwei, where people would do these little small drawings and they'd pick a position on the moon. And then over time, the moon would fill up with all of these drawings. And you saw people, start to try and draw things together with the limited space that they were allowed individually. Things like that can definitely create a sense of community.
Cool. So the next question is, have you heard about the Postmates robots?
Yes. And I know Patrick and Christine, if you want to geek out about it, Honestly, I don't feel it's like they recreated the wheels. Maybe because I grew up in Dubai and I'm spoiled. Literally, like we had drones delivering groceries before it was normal anywhere else. But I love the idea, and I love the fact that it's a cute little robot that will bring you things. But I'm gonna shut up and go to you guys.
I think you're right. I think it has a bigger impact for people on the street seeing the robot deliver something than the
Exactly.
actual person who's receiving it.
Great. So the next question is, I'm curious to know more about the activation using the air pulses to create a physical object. Can you elaborate on this technology and where you see it being used successfully?
So yeah, so what it does is underneath that pad that you see, there's a bunch of little motors that can push air. A lot like that children's toy where they pull back the elastic and then it snaps against like a little trampoline and blows a puff of air. Imagine like a matrix of those that are blowing up little pixels of wind, and you can control where those little pixels of wind reach your hand. It is quite new technology, but a lot of the successful implementations of it have to do with AR and VR. It actually allows people in VR to feel objects that are in that virtual environment. I've also seen it installed underneath like a pane of glass that had oil on it, and they were able to print images on the liquid as it was rippling around and create like a television with it, which is really cool.
Awesome. What's something, tech or innovation that has come out of this quarantine period that gets you excited? Maybe even something that's just developing or being played around with now. Maybe Hugh, you probably have something you want to bring up.
Well, I gotta say, I have to say that the prosumer availability of LiDAR is going to be the big game changer for marketers. I would say, like, I know we touched on it, and I would hazard that we probably spoke at length about it, but LiDAR being in your hands is going to be absolutely massive for those of us that look to how best to communicate space in a 2D environment, which is, you know, like a screen is a 2D environment, but to be able to actually communicate space using LiDAR is going to be absolutely massive.
This next question is such a good question. Patrick and Hugh, where do you draw inspiration? Is there a particular area that consistently surprises and wows you? I've always wanted to
Patrick
know.
go first.
I don't. I like if I told you, I'd have to kill you. No, I don't know. Just generally, all over the internet. What I like to do is kind of take a look at where the bleeding edge is for sensor technology and kind of try and subvert its original uses to try and find something creative. Because I think that people are smart and they know what's out there, but when you can use something that they already know in a new way, it kind of allows you to get to them on a level that they wouldn't normally be reachable on.
Yeah, I would say I look a lot at science fiction, whether it's dystopian or benevolent. You know, you look at what someone has created 30 years ago to just be a prop, and you go, "Wow, man, that'd be really cool if that existed." And that tends to be where I actually get my inspiration from. And then also, I'm a trained illustrator. I'm not a trained technologist. I've learned this along the way. So art and illustration and creating art is where I focus a lot of my own drive. So a lot of what I do involves music and motion and art, and which probably is what the people at Thinkingbox have noticed about me, is I tend to be talking a lot about art versus the sale, because the sale is something that happens regardless. I think bringing people together to create art is where I really, really love to.
Awesome. Thanks, both of you. So the next question is, do you see mobile AR moving away from specific apps like QR codes relying only on the camera? For me, this is a friction point.
So there's a lot of work being done with this thing called web AR, and it's actually going to be a standard across modern browsers where we can actually embed AR experiences right into the HTML of a web page. So that opens up a lot of doors that are not necessarily linked to a specific piece of software.
And like a year ago, I would have told you not to go anywhere near WebAR because it just is not there yet. And in the past year, it's really come a long way. It's still not what you can achieve in, you know, a downloadable app, or even some of, you know, the like Facebook, Snapchat, that kind of stuff. Just because they have a really defined tool set created, but the abilities in WebAR are like beyond what we can keep up with on the day-to-day. So certainly it's a thing to look at right now.
Great. Next question is, any more creative ideas for grocery? Like how to sample products that need preparation, like coffee, frozen foods, etc.
Again, it goes back to, and I know, Christine, you're more creative than I am. I'm more of the producer, but it goes back to the notion of, if we look at something as a hurdle, we will not get over that. We're still going out and buying our coffees, buying our ice creams. It's either behind plexiglass or taking extra precautionary. It's really dependent on the product and the story that you want to tell, because most important thing is to humanize the experience. If you're just going to have walls and plexiglasses and autonomous systems all the time, you kind of feel, it feels cold, for a lack of better word. So it really is. And what we excel at, and one thing I love about working here, is how do we figure out the story, the user journey? If we want this person to step in here and try our coffee, it's not just all of a sudden just slap it at the end and let them try it. It's how did Patrick or Christine or Hugh go from entering the actual experience to sampling what we need to do. Now, obviously through the COVID safety, through creative approach, but I think it's much easier than what people assume it is.
Yeah, I'd agree. In terms of the story, I think that's the kind of biggest way to kind of start, because it's not, I mean, in terms of foods that need preparation, if it's something that someone needs to prepare, again, we're all still ordering takeout, we're all still doing these things. So then the question is, what is the delivery mechanism that's going to resonate with somebody? So, you know, I'm in Toronto. It's going to snow any minute now. I'm terrified. Like, don't want that to happen right now. But, you know, I can imagine if there was a campaign, and I'm really just riffing out of nowhere, so, you know, bear with me. But like, if there's a campaign where it's like, get a hot soup on the street, and there's a truck with a hot soup in the back and a dispensing mechanism, which means I can just run outside of my building. I can follow a map of where the truck is going to be and get a notification when it's near me and run downside and try a hot soup. You know what? That's going to maybe be the most interesting thing I did in my day, because I'm sitting here at my dining room table for weeks on end, and something like that, while it's not that innovative, it's still something that can really kind of like make a splash and resonate. Or to Rania's point, on a hot day, or, you know, everybody just loves ice cream.
Yeah, you read my mind. I was just thinking, like, something as simple as a pop-up where you can follow the map or see where the truck or bus is, and you know that in 20 minutes it's going to be in my area. Like right now, if I'm mapping it, like, I think Google made it a couple of billion years ago with Santa Claus to see where he is, and that's still my favorite thing. Maybe because I'm just stalky and scary. No, but imagine knowing when the bus is gonna come to you, and you can get that cold, soft serve. And I was thinking about that as I was driving down. I was going to pick up lunch, and I saw a soft serve truck, and I was like, man, I wish they told me that it was there, because I'm like obsessed with ice cream. Like, I think it's through push, as Christine said, push notifications, fun, interactive, digital ways. And as Hugh says, everyone has a phone. Like, you cannot find, like, even my grandma has a phone. So you cannot swing a dead cat without hitting someone with a phone. And and being told where something's next to you if it interests you, same way Postmate or Uber does.
Just,
And also, I mean, and sorry to interrupt, but I mean, we're all individualized packaging tends to override the fear of the thing that has been prepared. You're not handing someone a soup in your hand, you're handing it in a sealed cup. Like it's, you know, I'm not too worried about how you would give someone a cup of coffee. Like that's the least of our concern.
And just one more thought on that, like on the kind of like mobile, because this isn't really something we touched on, but it is something that is super worth considering, is mobile activation, whether or not it's food related. You know, there are ways to kind of create something that the buzz can be about where is this thing, and maybe you can't go to, you know, theme park A or mall B in the same way that you might have done, but you can get some kind of experience come to you, and that could be the exciting thing. So again, it doesn't have to be a food sampling. You know, it could be a pop-up shop, it could be a sample sale, it could be, you know, a projection that is on wheels. You know, there's a lot, again, any of the ingredients we've talked about would kind of work in there, but that's something that, you know, back pocket, I've really been wanting to do for a long time. So
Like I've been wanting to do a candy dispensing truck for Halloween that's sanitized, and it's something cute with like shoots and pipes and flashy things.
Yeah, I wish that Halloween truck worked or went through, because that would have been awesome.
I know. Oh well.
Last question, guys. Just because it's 2:01 and I'm sure everyone has another call waiting. So the last question is, the future of experiential viewed through a sensorial lens seems to skew towards vision. Can you speak to some of the other ways to activate other senses in experiential activations?
I think off the top, I mean, we have the Ultraleap there, which will activate your sense of touch. And then there's also some hardware that I've tucked away as a bookmark that are like web-controlled, like scent dispensers. It's a bit on the edge of the COVID sensitivity to be putting things in the air for people, but we can certainly work with your sense of smell when it's appropriate as well.
speakers.
I was just about to say the
Directional speakers. I love them.
As the directional speakers, the scent. Like I remember a couple of years ago, we did this event for like kitchenware, and they didn't want to do the obvious of tasting. So like, how do we entice the people in the room? And it was really about the directional speakers of the sizzle. And then all of a sudden we started pumping the scent of steak, and everyone just started saying, damn, like I'm ready to go into the dinner right now, kind of like whetting the appetite.
Cool. All right.
That's about it.
Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We could nerd out on this stuff all day, as you could probably tell. And yeah, have a wonderful Thursday and weekend after tomorrow.
Yep. Have a fabulous weekend. And
Thank
if
you.
you're
Thank
in
you.
LA, have ice cream. If you're in the East Coast, get some soup.